So my ideal holy talent tree for paladins isn't actually all that different from Blizzard's, which might be a little surprising. I mean, I and just about every other player who came up with an ideal Holy Paladin talent tree before Blizzard came out with theirs had all the caster talents on one side and all the melee talents on the other side. And Blizzard's tree has shallow caster talents on the left and deep caster talents on the right, middle caster talents on the right for that matter. And it's the other way around for melee. Shallow melee talents on the right and deep melee talents on the left. That's counterintuitive, but I have done some thinking about it, and it's actually not as much of a problem as you might think at first. The way I see it is, if a player were allowed to spend talent points only on the talents that help with their chosen playstyle and no others, they'd have leftover talent points anyway. That's the nature of the beast with this talent system. And I think a good way to measure how much or if Blizzard's strategy sucks is to ask the question, how many talent points does a player need to spend on things they don't want to get the things that they do want? And the answer is not very many talent points, not really. So really, Blizzard spreading the talents out doesn't suck anything like as much I'd have expected it to suck. And when you take the whole we'd have talent points left over anyway thing into account, then it doesn't really suck at all. So I kept most of it and simply added in a few parts that I think could have been better done. For starters, I moved Divine Toll into the class talents, and it felt like Ashen Hallow was the most logical thing to put in its place. After all, that was the one Paladin Covenant ability that didn't make the jump from Shadowlands to Dragonflight. I'm very specifically saying that it felt logical because, well, if it's a logical reason to move a Spec talent into the class talent tree when that Spec talent is in all the Spec trees, then that logic ought to work just as well on Ashen Hallow as it does on Divine Toll. Personally, I like Divine Toll, but have little to no interest in Ashen Hallow, which is probably why I moved Divine Toll to the class talents. I will admit to my biases. It's better to admit your biases and take them into account in what you're doing than it is to pretend your biases don't exist. That being said, I think Ashen Hallow does make sense. Paladins already have a high-power single-target cooldown in Lay on Hands, which is about as much of a high-power single-target healing cooldown as any player could ask for. So the other high-power direct heals are multi-target, like Divine Toll, Tears Deliverance, and yes, Ashen Hallow. It being instant, it has its place with the other melee deep talents like Glimmer of Light and Crusader's Might. So I figure I didn't pork it up that badly by putting Ashen Hallow in Divine Toll's place. I chose the Fire Rune icon for Radiant Embers and its legendary effect. It seemed both light and fire-flavored enough to work. The biggest addition, from a caster playstyle player's perspective such as myself, was the inclusion of Beacon of the Lightbringer on the right-hand side of the talent tree in the middle, just under Tower of Radiance. Beacon of the Lightbringer was a Legion talent that caused our mastery to count either how close the target was to the Paladin or how close the target was to our beaconed target. This let us stand where we wanted to stand to benefit from our mastery, instead of always forcing us to be in melee, and the caster playstyle feels incomplete without Beacon of the Lightbringer. I also had to do a little more icon reshuffling. Beacon of the Lightbringer's icon was used for the Illumination talent, so I pulled back the Greater Heal icon that was used for an Illumination talent in Vanilla, and put that in with the Divine Insight talent. I also changed the Tower of Radiance icon to the Cataclysm Tower of Radiance icon, simply because I wanted to and liked that old icon. And I also changed the icon for Commanding Light to use the old Priest Divine Spirit icon, since no one and nothing is using that icon, and it looks very Beacon of Light-ish. I switched the places that Divine Favor and Resplendent Light were occupying, moved Moment of Compassion out of the choice node with Resplendent Light into its own node, and added Holy Radiance in its place. Holy Radiance was a ranged group heal with no cooldown that generated holy power when you cast it. I really miss that spell. And I figure putting it over here with Resplendent Light creates a choice for players. Efficient but slow group healing, or fast but expensive group healing. I switched this node with Divine Favor because I figured that Divine Favor shouldn't have a group healing node as a prerequisite. And as much as I miss the old Holy Radiance spell from Warlords and Mists of Pandaria, I figure that if they did bring Holy Radiance back, I would want them to call it something else. Something other than Holy Radiance, like, say, Divine Circle. Name it after the spell icon's file or something. That's because when Blizzard was making the Heroes of the Storm MOBA game, they gave Uther a Holy Radiance spell that was nothing like what we had in Warlords of Draenor. It was a projectile that traveled through enemies and allies, healing allies and damaging enemies. They even let you use that spell in World of Warcraft while playing as Uther in flashbacks from Shadowlands. I figure the developers would gladly add that Ball of Light Holy Radiance spell in a future expansion, so bringing back the old spell with a new name would keep the door open for that Ball of Light Holy Radiance projectile spell in the future. Even if it is a lot like Divine Star. The only other change I really made was bringing back Eternal Flame, a talent that adds a bonus heal over time when you cast Word of Glory. The right-hand side of the Holy Talent tree looked like it needed another talent in it after what I did with Moment of Compassion, and at first, that exact Holy Radiance projectile spell was what I wanted to put in there. I had figured at the time it's instant, so it's going to fit with the melee talents, but then I realized the devs are perfectly happy with unpruning older spells in this expansion, but adding brand new spells? I think they're saving that for the next expansion, when the talent trees are a bit more mature and they're feeling more confident. Personally, I think that any reason for not giving players awesome stuff is a bad reason, but I might not have that attitude if my livelihood depended on players wanting to buy the next expansion. In any case, Eternal Glory was right there in Paladin's history, so in it went in place of the brand spanking new Uther-style Holy Radiance projectile spell. Again, there's Empyrean Legacy both in the class tree and the Holy Tree because, well, the idea is that if you get one of them, then you basically turn Judgment into Hammer of the Vanquisher, but if you get both, then it's like you have Hammer of the Vanquisher and the Duty-Bound Gavel legendary that gives the effect and spell each a second charge. At least that's the idea. Hopefully, this ideal Holy Paladin talent tree provides food for thought and is worthwhile feedback for the developers. I expect that what I have to say about the Holy Tree is more what they wanted to hear than what I had to say about the Spec Tree, but hopefully they'll take both into account. I'll tell you one thing. If Denounce, and especially Beacon of the Lightbringer, aren't in our kits by the time Dragonflight ends, I will feel like the developers have failed us. Again.